Good afternoon. This is Business Incorporated on Channels Television. Welcome to the program. I'm Chimeze Obi-Wago. Coming up, Nigeria's oil production output falls by almost 40% to 1.4 million barrels a day. Oil prices up today with U.S. crude hitting a 6-month high on supply disruptions from Nigeria and Venezuela. And the U.S. discloses Saudi Arabia's holdings of U.S. debt, ending a long-standing policy of keeping the figures secret. We'll begin there in Saudi Arabia, where the U.S. has released a breakdown of Saudi Arabia's holdings of U.S. debt, ending a long-lasting policy of keeping the figures secret. The stockpile of the world's biggest oil exporter stood at $116.8 billion as of March, up from $82.7 billion 2 years earlier. The sum ranks the kingdom among the top dozen foreign nations in terms of holdings of U.S. debt and compares with China's $1.2 trillion and $1.1 trillion for Japan. The U.S. had kept the monarchy's holdings under wraps since 1974, an unusual blackout born out of the aftermath of the Arab oil embargo, when a surge in crude prices left the American economy reeling and the U.S. struggling to lure petrodollars. Now the question of Saudi holdings is gaining importance as the monarchy faces fiscal pressure from the decline in oil prices since 2014 and costly wars in the Middle East. China's ICBC Standard Bank, the world's biggest bank by assets, has agreed to buy a massive vault in London. It will be the first Chinese lender to own a vault in London as it looks to grow its precious metals business. The vault, which is in a secret location and is being sold by Barclays, can hold up to 2,000 metric tons of gold, silver, platinum and palladium. The deal will give ICBC more influence over trading, pricing and storage of precious metals. No financial details were given, but the deal is expected to be completed in July. China accounts for more than a quarter of global gold demand, but trading of the yellow metal remains centered out of London and New York. Around $5 trillion in transactions were handled in London's bullion market last year. And the Asian market stocks rallied today after oil prices hit a 6-month high following signs the global supply glut is easing. Brent crude, the international benchmark, is trading close to $50 per barrel, while West Texas Intermediate, the U.S. benchmark, is around $48. Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 closed 1.1% higher. In Australia, the commodities heavy benchmark S&P ASX 200 index rose 0.7%, led by gains in energy-related shares. In South Korea, the Kospi index swung between gains and losses before closing flat at 1,968 points. In Greater China markets, the Shanghai Composite Index was up 0.1%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng was 0.7% higher. Now from Asia, we cross over to the European market. Javier Arguedas, DWTV Channels TV financial correspondent, is standing by to give us a sense of the markets out there today. Good afternoon, Javier. Good to see you. Well, Javier, the Asian markets rallied today thanks to the oil price, which has hit half-year high. How is the DAX starting off a new week after the long weekend in Germany?
Well, we had a quite good start to the trading session. We saw some strong gains at the DAX in the first hours of the trading session, but that changed quickly. As you can see behind my back, if you take a look at the curve, you can see that the DAX dropped and is now in negative territory, losing about 0.2% as we speak. This is a consequence, well, the gains were a consequence, of course, of the good closure of the Asian markets that you already mentioned, but it changed quickly due to problems in the automotive sector, which we know is the backbone of the German economy. One of the most important rating agencies basically downgraded the entire sector, and that is giving investors a little bit of a headache there. That's why we're seeing those losses. The other important factor is caution ahead of very important economic data that is due to be released on the economy of the United States. We will see industrial production and inflation rates in just a few moments, and investors are, of course, looking forward to that. That's why, and nobody wants to take risks at this point. So we're seeing that slight loss in the DAX.
All right, Javier, just before we get to that automobile issues, talking about VW, let's look at this. U.S. had disclosed Saudi Arabia's debt holdings after 14 years, which reveals the stockpile of the world's biggest oil exporter at $116.8 billion. How are investors reacting to this?
Well, I would say the investor reaction is moderate. On the one hand, of course, this should not come as a surprise. We know that the U.S. and Saudi Arabia have very close relations, and now this is just one more proof of that. Of course, it implies a lot of influence of Saudi Arabia in as an investor of U.S. debt. But as you already mentioned and told us, it is not that much compared to other countries like China or Japan. So this is certainly nothing that will come as a shock. That being said, perhaps the positive outlook here is that the U.S. Treasury Department is being more transparent, is showing who is investing in the U.S. debt, and that is basically good for the market, because the more information you have, the more transparent it is, well, the more possibilities you have to make your decisions. So that's why that will basically counter possible fears of that big influence of Saudi Arabia in U.S. debt bonds.
Get back to the automobiles. VW's troubles are yet to be over. This time, Norway's sovereign wealth fund is planning to sue the automaker. Would VW ever come out of this crisis?
Well, that is the, I would say, more than $1 million question for sure. We really don't know how this is going to end, and we don't know the extension of these problems. It seems like we are hearing more and more agencies and more governments basically suing VW on the emissions scandal. We also know that other companies are starting to have problems of their own, like the other German car maker Opel, which is part of General Motors, which now has its own emissions scandal. On the one hand, VW, as we know, has put aside about 8 billion euros in order to cover the costs of these legal issues. Many say that that is not going to be enough, but so far we have not had any concrete number on how this is going to play out in the company's finances. On the other hand, and perhaps that's a little bit of a silver lining for VW, we see that the sales numbers are starting to recover from the crisis, so it will all depend on whether VW actually achieves a good positioning in the market, bringing out the right products for the right customers after the crisis. That is something that I can definitely not really tell, but until then we will continue to see more actions by more governments, and that is severely going to hit the company's finances.
Oh, thank you very much for those updates, Javier. Thank you for your time, and do enjoy the rest of the day.